Montgomery gives us something to look forward to, doesn't she? Thank you. That was beautiful. Thank you. Hello, everyone. Good morning.
Good morning.
Well, you obviously don't know me. My name is Valerie Hope. I actually go to Unity on Greenville and thought I wanted to share a special message with you. One thing you should know about me, I didn't realize I was black until I was 14 years old. I know it might sound strange. Yes, I mean, I could see the mirror. I knew the color of my skin, but I didn't realize it mattered until I was 14. Oh, I'm just starting out. You guys are so generous. Okay, good. So I'm originally from the Republic of Panama in Latin America. And there, we lived in the capital. There was a lot of diversity, people from all different backgrounds and ethnicities. My dad joined the US Army when I was 9 years old. So we immigrated to the United States. And we lived on military bases. Military bases are also quite diverse. Now, especially when we lived in Hawaii. We lived there for 4 years. It was beautiful. Such a rich melting pot of all different cultures. I remember I had a crush on Mark Inoue. I hope he's not watching this live stream. I don't think he ever knew. But it's been years, but still, I'm sometimes a little sheepish about saying that. And he was tall, handsome, super talented, very smart. He played the tenor sax, and I played the clarinet, so he sat right behind me in band. And you know, it never occurred to me to make a big deal of the fact that he was Japanese. Didn't make a difference. And then my family moved to Fort Rucker, Alabama when I was 14. Have you been there? Oh, dear. So my freshman year of high school, I remember my very first day. So the military kids, we didn't have a high school on base, so we had to go to a local school. So we get on the bus, and luckily I sit next to this senior who happens to be from Panama as well. So I was like, oh my gosh, what a relief. We had this great conversation about the military base and about Panama, and she really takes my mind and the anxiety, the edge off getting to school. But once I got there, I was on my own again. And you know, there was this whole deal about finding my locker, trying to figure out where the classes were, all of that. I didn't even really get to connect with the other students just because we didn't have the time and I was so stressed. So I was looking forward to lunchtime when I'd have a chance to socialize a little more. Then I walked into the cafeteria and I was shocked. So on one side of the cafeteria sat all white students. And on the other side of the cafeteria sat all the black students. I'd never seen that in real life before. I'd only seen it on TV, like civil rights movies from the 60s. But this was 1988. It was weird, and I was actually a little scared, because I was thinking, okay, does it matter where I sit? If I sit in the wrong spot, do I get beat up? I mean, this is high stakes. Freshman year, first day of school, it's huge. Luckily, I was scanning the crowd, and I saw the senior from the bus. And I just took my tray and walked slowly, just praying, I hope she lets me sit with her. And she nodded yes, and I was like, okay, what a relief. Now, this is not exclusive to Alabama. It's not exclusive to middle school. It's not even exclusive to 1988. The challenge there, I think, is that there are places where you find segregation between people all the time, but not just by race or ethnicity. Sometimes it's by age, industry, socioeconomic status. You name it, we'll find a way to divide by it. It's just human. And although there's a lot of comfort in connecting with people who are like us, there's this deep richness in connecting with people who are not. Now, I later learned that my high school had been integrated in 1969. So when I thought about that, that meant that the grandparents and parents of my classmates had never shared a school building. My school happened to be the white school, and the black students went to another school across town. I mean, not only did they not share a building, they never even shared a lunchroom or a table. But what I thought was odd was that, nearly 20 years later, laws had been established, right? Obviously, there was integration now, and yet people were not able to share a meal. Do you remember the first time you realized you were different in a way that mattered to you? Yeah. I mean, those moments have a way of marking who we are and how we move in the world, for good or bad. Luckily, I've had the opportunity to travel quite a lot since then, and I really made it my mission to find ways to connect with people and really focus on what it takes to change the hearts and minds of people around the world, including my own. The laws and systems can only take us so far. The rest is up to us. This whole joy for me has been based on knowing who people truly are and discovering that. I remember last year, about a month or so after the murder of George Floyd, a company reached out to me. I'm a leadership coach and a professional speaker, and they asked, hey, do you do anything around unconscious bias? Right? Unconscious bias being, that we have aversions or preferences to different types of people. The problem sometimes is that those preferences either have us promote certain people or hire certain people or praise certain people, criticize others, and they thought it would be a good idea to bring this into the workplace. So I got into a conversation with the HR director, and I tried to find out, tell me a little bit more about what's happening in the organization. And she shared that shortly after that happened, they had an all-staff meeting. And in that staff meeting, they discovered so many of their employees were traumatized, not only by what they'd seen on the news, but also what they'd heard from other family and friends. And they didn't think that the organization was doing enough to support them during this very trying time. So the organization, wanting to do the right thing, they established a committee, Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Committee. And the committee put together all sorts of cool resources, books, videos, articles, you name it, to support the employees in continuing to learn and become more aware, self-aware. So once she shared all of the things that they did, I asked her, okay, so what's been the impact? What are people in your organization saying now? Silence. Well, it's been about 6 weeks. I haven't heard anything, she said. I'm like, 6 weeks? People dealing with trauma for 6 weeks? And this committee putting all that time and energy, putting together resources, and you have no idea if it's working? And she said, I didn't know what to do or say. I mean, it could be high stakes for her too. I mean, how do you know if you say the right thing or you don't say the right thing, if what you put together was actually helpful or hurtful? It's probably hard to even know that, which for her, she wasn't ready to step in those conversations. The irony is that they were doing the right thing. At least in their minds, they were doing the right thing. The problem was that that was their first step in putting together the resources. The first step really could have been approaching those employees and with curiosity and compassion just found out, like, what are they dealing with? What's going on in their lives? What is it that's triggered them? Like, really discovering who they were versus applying a universal approach. Now, I know this because I worked in corporate HR for 14 years, and we'd always have this annual diversity training, and the training was fun. I mean, I gotta admit, we were very engaging, and there was a lot of great activities. We learned about microaggressions. We learned about the proper terminology to use to label and describe different types of people. And then we'd end with a rousing rendition of our harassment policy and discrimination policies. Whew, heart and soul of human resources. But you know what was fascinating is the same people who attended the workshop, if their coworker said or did something that they found offensive, they would rather go to the manager or HR to complain about it than actually have a conversation with their peer. There it is again. How do we make sure that people feel safe in having conversations that are meaningful to them? Aren't people tired of walking on eggshells? Of all the conversations and interactions being these high-stake, pressure-filled, overwhelming, rough. I mentioned my dad was in the Army. So he was in the Army for 27 years. And he told me that they used to play this game called pushball. Anybody military? Anyone? No? Yes? Okay. Pushball? Dependent. Yes, me too. They play this game called pushball. Now, push ball was a game where they played with this huge ball that was about 6 feet in diameter, so taller than me. It weighed about 50 pounds. And this was part of their fitness. So they'd have 2 huge teams, and in the length of this football field, the 2 teams have a goal. And their objective was to take this ball and push it towards their goal. But then the other team, of course, was pushing just as hard, right? So both teams were trying to push this huge ball down the field. And my dad said if they got really smart and there was a moment and there was some momentum, the team could get under the ball and lift it up in the air and bounce it over the heads of the opponents. And that way they could score faster and go further. What if these conversations around diversity, equity, and inclusion are kind of like this heavy 6-foot, 50-pound ball? And people are pushing it on either side. Ugh. There's all this friction. What if we lifted the ball? Diminished the friction? Like found the path of least resistance? Wouldn't that be worth it? Absolutely. And when they played this game, it got kind of rough. People got trampled, elbowed, stepped on. And sometimes that happens when we have hard conversations. But if we could just find a way to take that, make it lighter. Not lighter because I want to diminish or minimize the effort that it takes to move things forward in any kind of system or society, but to make it more joyful, more fun. So I think how we bring joy, even in the most uncomfortable situations, is by doing 3 things. We can be curious, we can build connection, and then disrupt the status quo just a bit, or a lot. So let's talk about curiosity. First of all, we need to unpack it. Curiosity is about being creative and seeing what's there, but also wondering what's not, and why it is or why it isn't. And then formulating some questions about that. But the key is being actually courageous enough to ask those questions. So I have a coaching client, her name is Noelle, and she's wanting to become more curious in her life. She shared that she was okay with me sharing this story. So we were talking, and she mentioned that she has 2 dogs. She takes for a walk every single day. They go to this park. And when she goes to the park, she sees this older woman with this big floppy hat who's always picking up plastic bottles, putting them in this bag. And she's always wondered, why is this woman picking up plastic bottles? Every time? She doesn't work for the park. Is she mad at people throwing plastic bottles on the ground? So she had all these questions. She kept wondering. So I challenged her a little bit and said, okay, well, if you have these questions, you're working on your curiosity, ask her. And so she did. Next time she went to the park, she saw the woman, she walked up to her. Turns out the woman is a retired psychologist. Her husband had passed away a couple of years before. And she was actually quite frustrated that people left trash. But she felt there was such a deep respect for this shared space that she couldn't help herself. She felt that she had to contribute something. And then she was so excited that Noelle brought her dogs because she lost her dogs and just was too afraid to get more because she didn't want to deal with death again. So she spent a lot of time petting them. Imagine that one small instance, that one small connection, just because she was curious. And what's interesting? I learned that there was a study done. Harvard Business School did this study. There's on questions and why they have this power to become so joyful. And one of the things they found out that the best question to ask are open-ended follow-up questions. The more of those questions you ask, the more people like you. But then there's a thing, that the more of those questions you answer, the more you like them. It's win-win. The more questions you ask and the more questions you answer, people automatically connect. And that's what's so important about building connection. About a year ago, I was inspired to start a new podcast. I had an interaction with some colleagues who told me they would love to have more diversity in the lives of their kids. They had plenty of people of color around them, but they just didn't feel that they were friends, more acquaintances, and they wanted to have even more. And I thought, well, I live that way, so what could I bring to this and contribute? So the podcast is called Not Quite Strangers. I bring 2 people together who don't know each other, and we have a meaningful conversation about anything. I just try to find a thin line or thread of connection. I had a couple of guests recently, Reba and Bridget, both gay women. One is black, one is white. And although I knew both of them, I'd never talked to them explicitly about their sexual orientation, much less in public, much less for posterity to be recorded. And I was so nervous. I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't want to say the wrong thing. I don't want to offend them. I don't want to ask an ignorant question. Here we go. I remember at one point in the conversation, I said, we talked about the acronym LGBTQIA+. And I said, okay, make sure I have all of those letters correct. Can you fill me in on what they are? What was ironic is that both of them were Generation Xers. So they said, they've added a few letters since I came out of the closet, so I'm not sure. And just in case you're left wondering, so is lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, intersex, asexual, plus. Whew, it's a mouthful, right? But what was so funny is that because I didn't really need to know the answer, I just needed to be curious enough to ask, it connected all of us instantly. Because they were also like, I don't know if we have the right thing. So shortly after that interview, we had this round of emails going around, because one of them said, Valerie, I think I may have said something dismissive about you or to you. And the other one said, I think I missed one of the letters in LGBTQIA+. And I was like, I think I talked about my Japanese crush and compared that to coming out of the closet. Sorry. So all of us took a turn around the wheel of apologies. And it was hilarious, and although very awkward, we all came from a place of authenticity and non-judgment. And so what could have created more separation actually brought us even closer together. It was beautiful. Now, to be responsible, I did go back and listen to the episode just to make sure, and there was no dismissive comment as far as I was concerned. Yes, the other person, she did miss a letter, but it wasn't the one she thought. And in the context, talking about Mark, my Japanese male crush, was absolutely appropriate. And at the end of that interview, I did announce that anyone who had been triggered or confused or confronted by anything that we did or said, felt offended, should definitely get in communication with us or with somebody that they care about so that they could express themselves. I'm going to extend the same invitation to you guys today. So if I say anything here that confuses, triggers, or whatever, please let me know. I'd love to get in a conversation about it. So the conversation that taught me a really valuable lesson, it did, that even after feeling self-conscious, that connection did not get diminished. There's this organizational theorist, his name is Russell Ackoff, and he says, the more efficient you are at doing the wrong thing, the wronger you become. It is much better to do the right thing wrong than the wrong thing right. If you do the right thing wrong and correct it, you get better. You get better. So when you do something genuine, you seldom are going to do it perfectly. But the idea here is that it's not about being perfect. It's just having the authenticity and grace to make it safe for others to be themselves. The Book of Joy, any of you heard or read the Book of Joy by Dalai Lama? Yes. So the Dalai Lama and Bishop Desmond Tutu wrote this book called the Book of Joy. And the Dalai Lama in it says that the dimensions of gender, ethnicity, race, etc., are actually quite insignificant when we talk about humanity. What really matters is human emotion. We all have the desire to be happy, the desire to avoid suffering. We also have a human brain, human heart, human longings, human frailties. And we, although may not see it, we're deeply connected. So I'd like to lead you in one of the practices that they highlighted in their book. It's called the Common Humanity Practice. So everybody just take a deep breath with me. Now think of someone you love. It might be a child, it could be a spouse, a friend, even a pet. Bring their image to mind. Just get present to the love you have for them. And notice the warmth and open-heartedness that provokes. Now imagine their desire to be happy, their desire to avoid suffering. think about the way that they live their lives to accomplish this. All right, take another deep breath. Now I want you to think of someone that you may not know so well. Perhaps a neighbor, a colleague, maybe somebody in this room. Notice how your feelings may be different than the first person you thought about. Perhaps there are feelings of indifference, maybe separation, perhaps even judgment. Imagine being this person. Their life, their hopes, their dreams, as well as their disappointments. Now recognize that they, like you, they also want happiness and want to avoid suffering. You already share the greatest bond, your humanity. They may be just as lonely, and reaching out to them might be a gift. All right, take another deep breath. You may open your eyes. I know that after doing an exercise like that, it sounds easier said than done. But I think even in the song it said, right? Mrs. Montgomery told us just being kind goes a long way. A warm glance, a smile, a gesture, a friendliness. There's so many opportunities to take that connection. Likely whatever you choose to do will somewhat disrupt the status quo, either for yourself, for others, maybe even both if you're lucky. My mom belongs to this Facebook group for her neighborhood. And she told me the other day, some guy posted pictures of a neighbor's yard. The yard was completely overgrown. It looked a hot mess. And it was posted to kind of shame or embarrass the person into getting their act together, probably to report them to the HOA. But what if he'd taken a page out of my coachee Noelle's book and got curious? What if he'd written a note and put it in the mailbox saying, hey, I noticed your lawn needs a little help. How can I help? Or what if instead he posted online, who wants to join me in a random act of kindness to take care of that yard? Or better yet, knocked on that neighbor's door and found out, hey, are you doing okay? I think the challenge here is that we just have to open a heart to the people around us. It doesn't have to be a grand gesture. That HR director, her mind was in the right place, but she chose to protect her heart. That's why she couldn't approach those individuals. Now, the Dalai Lama and Bishop Tutu say, don't get discouraged if some people are suffering so much for their own loneliness and isolation that they can't even acknowledge you. Have empathy for their loneliness as well as your own. Now, I want to leave you today with a way to access connection and curiosity, a little homework assignment, if you will, if you choose to accept it. That person that you thought about from the common humanity practice, the one that you don't know so well, think of something you've noticed about them or wondered about them. Maybe it's their lawn. Maybe some behavior that you saw is maybe different than what you would do. Connie, I so appreciate when you mentioned what you're dealing with now, living in a new living situation. There might be individuals in your own environment that you're like, why do they do it like that? Now, my challenge to you is to summon the courage to actually ask them your question. Remember, they're going to like you because you're asking. And you'll like them even more because they answer it. Win-win. Now, if you really want to deepen the experience, come back together at some point and share with each other what you discover about yourself or about your neighbor. My wish for you is that you notice. You notice when you're feeling heavy or avoiding certain people or certain conversations. That's the perfect time to think, okay, how can I lift the ball? Can I lift the ball? How can I be curious? How can I find a way to get connected? What might disrupt my status quo or theirs? The box that we put ourselves or other people in is absolutely insufficient for the human beings we are. It's insufficient. They said that the aspen grove It may look like individual trees, but they're actually connected. Aspen's a rhizome. Now, we are also a rhizome. We're all connected. The key is following the root system to find out where is that connection. Right? That's why we have to go below the surface. An injury to one is an injury to all. And on the other hand, a good thing for one is a good thing for all. And I leave you with this quote from Dr. Lila Watson. She says, "If you have come to help me, you're wasting your time. But if your liberation is bound with mine, let us work together." Thank you.